Daniel, interestingly, my name is Daniel, right? So it would make sense for me to have known about Daniel a lot. But it's kind of weird because I think it's like a mental thing where if you're named after someone, it's kind of a big burden to live up to that name. And so for me personally, even for me, my dad named me Daniel in 1986 when I moved to America. Out of all the names in the Bible, my dad chose Daniel. And so for me, the character of Daniel was a kind of a big burden, and I never really studied him. I have to be honest. I never really studied Daniel because for me he was like a big responsibility or like a thing that I had to live up to. But during this time of Daniel prayer meeting, I had the great privilege and the opportunity to really study this person and character of Daniel. And I think it just helps that I'm a little older to be able to see him a little bit more objectively and to be able to see his life and reflect upon that. And so that's why I wanted to share. Because Daniel is one who lived up to his name. We all have names. Every one of us who is Christian, who believes in the God, we must understand that our names are not just names that were given by our parents. Christians, people who believe God, who fear God, know that our titles, our names, are given titles by God, almost like foredestiny of our futures. Titles and names. Many of us don't live up to our names, I don't think, because most of us, and many of us, are named after great people, including this guy named Daniel. I don't think I'll ever live up to this person, because the more I study him, the more I look up to him, the more I find that he is such a huge, huge person. And so that's what I wanted to share. Daniel, coming from the two words, Dan, which is Dan, the tribe of Dan, which literally means judge, and El. Anytime you see the sound El in a name in Hebrew, you guys should just simply know that it means God. El is God. Daniel. God is my judge. Daniel, the name of Daniel, first shows up in the Bible as an Israelite name, actually as a second son of David, who actually kind of disappears from history and is considered one of the four sinless members of Israel in all of history. Daniel, God is my judge. And if you think about it, if you look at the name, his name is very popular now. And we must understand, it's popular, it's so popular in the world today because Daniel was such a great person. And we must understand that, and we must start from there. And if you think about it, his other four friends, his other three friends that were with him, their names, the meaning of their Hebrew names, speak about God's goodness and power. Hananiah means God has been gracious to me, or one who is favored by Jehovah or God. Hananiah, God has been gracious to me. Mishael means the powerful one of God. Powerful one of God. Good name. Azariah, the help of Jehovah, the help of God. Another good, positive name. And we must understand that at this time of history in Israel, they were on their downfall. So when the parents named their sons, people of nobility, people of royalty, people at the top of Israelite, the kingdom, when they name their children, they had a purpose. And in a way, they were being told by God to name their children this way because it would be a prediction of the future. While Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah have these positive tones of God will help us, God is strong, I am a powerful being of God, Daniel's name is actually kind of weird. It's tense. It's a very tense name. And it's a very serious name. God is my judge. Not I am the judge of God, but God is my judge. A very tense and almost attacking name upon the history of Israel. We must understand, I must begin by saying that Daniel was no normal human being. Like I said, the name of Daniel is so popular because he was such a great person. Daniel is a giant among ants in the human history. He was an advisor to emperors and survived 3 destructions of kingdoms. 3 kings were murdered. 3 emperors were murdered. And yet Daniel survived. While people around him were disposed, murdered, and simply just forgotten with time, just like Joseph was. Joseph, even though he was one of the greatest leaders of his time, the next Pharaoh just forgot about him. Daniel not only survives being a close second advisor to the former king, but he rises again and again in the ranks of this new empire. When a new regime comes in, the king or the emperor cannot get rid of Daniel. Instead, Daniel again rises up in the ranks. While the Bible has no space to tell of all his achievements, you must understand that Jewish scholars and Jewish historians and religious story makers have countless, multiple, endless stories about how Daniel was great, about all the miracles that Daniel did, because Daniel was such an important figure and such a giant in the history of Israel. Because he was the one who restored faith in God when everyone else fell. See, Daniel is famous for his ability, right? Most famous for his ability to interpret dreams, right? That's what we're known for. No doubt, Daniel was able to survive and rise so high in the ranks because of his ability. Because his ability to forecast dreams and stuff, the ability that God gave him, was in line with the religious beliefs of that time. We must understand. Because the kings and the emperors back then, during Daniel's time, also believed in soothsayers and fortune tellers. They believed in magicians. So Daniel was considered a magician, a fortune teller. The Bible describes Daniel as speaking with angels and receiving visions from them. In fact, Daniel was given visions of things no one saw and no one will see until the Apostle John sees a revelation of God at the end of our New Testament. There is no one like Daniel in all of the Bible. See, Gabriel is only mentioned in Daniel. The angels. Angels. We like to talk about angels a lot because humans like that kind of stuff. But in the Bible, angels don't show up a lot. The name Gabriel only shows up in Daniel and in Luke, when the angel comes to proclaim the birth of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Michael, or Michael, like the American version, Michael does not show up again until the New Testament. The name Michael only comes up in Daniel, in other words. No one in the Old Testament knew the name Gabriel or Michael as angel. Yeah. Gabriel means man of God or hero of God. Michael means who is like God. Who is like God. You must understand, Michael is actually a name that is used by a lot of Israelites during their time because it's a good name. Who was like God? Gabriel, not so much, but these are 2 angels. Gabriel was what? The messenger of God. So we must understand, when Gabriel, the angel, speaks to Daniel for the first time, Gabriel calls Daniel Son of Man. When we hear these words, this is the very title that Jesus himself would use when he comes onto this earth. He would call himself the Son of Man. The angels only called 2 people in all of the Old Testament Son of Man. Who? Ezekiel and Daniel. Why? because those two people interacted with angels the most. In other words, when an angel came and called Daniel son of man, it is not saying you're a son of man like Jesus. He's saying, son of man, meet son of gods. Son of man, human being, you are meeting an angel. You are meeting a son of God. Beware. And the thing is, we have two experiences of Ezekiel and Daniel meeting these angels. But the experiences of Ezekiel and Daniel are completely very different if you think about the story. Ezekiel, just like John, when John sees the new revelations in the end of the book, they're kind of dragged along by the angels. Okay? Ezekiel sees the angel, he faints, and the angel picks him up and he brings him somewhere. Same thing with John. John sees the angel, he faints, they pick him up, they send him out, they show him stuff, and they're like, understand this what it means, and now go away. So they're dragged along. They're almost forced to see the vision by God in order to record what will happen in the future. Of course, in the book of Daniel, in the same way, when Daniel first sees Gabriel, he describes him as like a guy whose face is like lightning, right? His legs and arms are made of shiny brass. His hair is like fire. Okay, they didn't have anything to compare it to, but an angel, if you see it, he's going to be like a guy lit up with LED lights. That's the closest thing that I can think of right now. So when Daniel first saw the angel Gabriel, he freaked out, he passed out, and Gabriel revives him. And yet, the difference between Ezekiel or Daniel and everyone else is that we see Daniel actually develop a relationship with the angel Gabriel. Even so much that Gabriel starts telling Daniel about his friends and their names. It's not so informal that Gabriel is like joking around with Daniel, but Gabriel is allowed to reveal his title and his name. In other words, he is allowed to reveal the very secrets of the kingdom of God to Daniel. And this doesn't happen to anyone else in the history of mankind. Daniel is the only human being until Mary, the birth mother of Jesus Christ, who gets to know the name Gabriel. No angel has the patience or the desire or even the need or the want to tell their name. The name of angels, we must understand, before God is a title. It's not just a name. It is a title. It's a description of who you are, your identity. It is a very essence of who you are. They don't reveal it to anyone. So when Gabriel revealed his name to Daniel, it was a relationship. Gabriel, the angel, many scholars, including myself, I don't call myself a scholar, but many Christian scholars think that the Gabriel stands at the left side of God himself as one of the 4 or 7 superior angels that surround the throne of God. Gabriel and Michael are considered one of the angels who protect the throne of God so that nothing could deter his glory or his honor. God is not small enough to deal with all that, stuff. The angels stand before God's throne and disallows anything that is not perfect or holy to reach the presence of God. And it is said that Michael is the one who stands and pushes Lucifer back to disallow Lucifer from coming to God again and bugging him. The great angel reserved only to bring messages from God's throne itself. This angel, who is at the left hand of God himself, who is literally the personal messenger of God, is allowed to tell his name to this little man called Daniel. And the biggest thing is, Daniel's head didn't blow up. He didn't explode. He didn't die, because that would be the normal, common reaction to anyone who met such a spirit. Sometimes maybe think like when you look at the names, maybe it's because like they have similar names. Daniel, Gabriel, Michael, I don't know. They all have L. They have the name of God in their names. I don't know. Maybe it's because of that. But the most thing we must understand is unlike any other human being in the history of everything, Daniel faced deities. Daniel faced angels. Daniel faced the forces of God himself and survived. Daniel spoke with fire and walked out unburnt. Daniel conversed with a hurricane and stood unfazed. Daniel talked with a tsunami and laughed. Daniel whispered with the greatest of man's fears and stood his ground. For that is what it would feel like to meet such an existence. Angels are servants of God, and yet, they are powerful beings. Now, so the question is, guys, the question for all of us is this. Don't you want to talk to angels? Don't you want to have the power to shout down demons? Don't you want to command spirits to listen to you? Don't you want to have angels come and bring you God's answer directly? Don't you want to hear the voices of angels and of gods? And the question is this at the end. What made Daniel such a man that he was not only able to speak to angels and live, but that the very creator of the universe sent his personal messenger? If you look at the story, God sent his personal messenger to fight for 3 weeks in order to bring Daniel his message. The left hand of God himself, that great angel, had to fight for 3 weeks against the forces of hell itself in order to bring God's message to Daniel. Daniel, of course, God could have just given it to it by a dream, just throwing that message in a dream. Of course, God could have, but how cool was it? How awesome is it? How awesome was it that Gabriel himself showed up in front of Daniel and gave him that message? Why did God do this? Because God loved him. How cool was it that Daniel was given an answer directly by God? In my opinion, Daniel is one of the most central figures in the Bible. As I am reading him, I have to place him in line with Abraham, Moses, and David. Why? I placed them together not because of what they accomplished or what they did or any of that stuff, but because of how much God liked these people. Abraham was chosen by God. Moses was called a friend by Yahweh. And God said that David was one after his own heart. You see, we must understand, no other human beings in the Bible was so labeled and liked by God until the coming of Christ. Until Christ comes, no one is able to even get this kind of closeness with God. And so what does that mean, guys? God plays favorites. That is the biblical truth. God plays favorites. And the reason I place Daniel in amongst these people is because of these words. For you are greatly loved. O Daniel, man, greatly loved. O man, greatly loved. Greatly loved by who? Greatly loved. The word shamed in Hebrew, kamed, it means to long for, to want, like a man longs for his lover or a woman longs for his lover. It means to want, desirableness, preciousness. And most importantly, this is a word that is never used with God. Because God, by essence, cannot like a human being. This word was never used by God liking anything. Because God cannot like something so broken, something so unholy. And yet we see in the Old Testament, even before Christ, Daniel not just loved, but greatly loved. Greatly loved. That's the reason. Why did Gabriel come himself? Because Daniel was greatly loved. In other words, that is what God is saying to Daniel. In fact, saying to all of us, I guess today, in fact, all of this is because you are loved by God. All of the visions, all of the greatness, all of the power, all of the visions, all of the answers that you have are because you are loved by God. But Daniel was super loved, desired, like a lover. Daniel, man, loved by God. There is no other title in the world, in the history of existence, that is bigger than this. Daniel, man, loved by God. No other titles will echo in eternity as this one. What does the gospel say, though? What does the gospel say? How are we saved? By grace, because of love. With man, all things are impossible. But with God, all things are possible. We cannot be loved by God ourselves. It's not possible. We cannot go before God's throne and expect to be accepted. That's not possible. We are bugs. We are worms. But with God, it is possible. That is the gospel. The gospel of Christ is that even though we are nothing, even though compared to the greatness of people who went before us like Abraham, Moses, David, Daniel, we are nothing. Even though we are nothing, and even though when compared to those people, we have no place in the kingdom of heaven, it is impossible for us. With God, it is possible because He's God. If He chooses, it simply is. And because He is good, He chooses good. Don't forget that God loved us first. And so, as the bride of Christ, the church is greatly loved. And we, as the children of God, by definition, are greatly loved. So, when we are thrown into the den of this world's beasts, we may be afraid, but we can stand tall. We do stand tall. The lions of this world and the fires of hell themselves may threaten us, but the lions will dare not attack, and the fires will dare not burn us. The lions may stare, and they may growl, and they may bark, and they may even look like they are threatening. And some will grovel and turn away, looking for a chance and an opportunity to stab us. Some will sneak away to hide. But none will dare to strike at a child of God without the consent of the Father. For whom the Lord has set free, no chain can hold. Even death itself has no power over those who are loved by the Creator and Holder of all life. For we, the Bible has told us, we, without doing anything, we, just like Daniel, who spoke to angels. We are greatly loved. Let us remember. Let us pray.